In this video, we'll show you what indie games do well on Nintendo Switch, and we'll also analyze them and try to figure out why, so that you can use these learnings for your own games. We are Ask Gamedev, and today we'll be discussing what indie games sell well on Nintendo Switch. Welcome back! If you're new to Ask Gamedev, we make videos to help you learn about the games industry so that you can elevate your games and inspire others. If you're on a game dev journey, consider subscribing. We'd love to help you out along the way. One of our favorite videos to work on was our 5 tips on how to develop indie games for Nintendo Switch video. A natural follow-up question we get from that video is, what type of game should I make? And it was a tough question to answer, until now. Luckily for us, Nintendo has recently announced their 10 best-selling indie titles on the console. Today we'll look at each one and see if we can find any similarities between the 10 that can help inform design decisions. So, without further ado, as of last week, the top-selling indie games in terms of units for Nintendo Switch are, in no particular order, SteamWorld Dig 2. SteamWorld Dig 2 is the much-anticipated follow-up to SteamWorld Dig and the spin-off SteamWorld Heist. It's a Metroidvania-style action platformer and features a pretty cool digging mechanic, similar to the one in games like Mr. Driller, Dig Dug, and Boulder Dash. Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is a top-down farming sim. You've inherited your grandfather's old farm plot, and armed with hand-me-down tools and a few coins, you set out to begin your new life. It's a relaxing game that's reminiscent of the Harvest Moon series. Kamiko. Kamiko is a top-down action-adventure similar to The Legend of Zelda. This game was one of the first indie titles available on Switch. That, along with the fact that it is the least expensive title on the list, at $5, might be partly why this game made the list. Celeste. From the creator of Towerfall comes Celeste, a tough-as-nails platformer similar to games like Slime Sand and Super Meat Boy. Celeste is one of the newer titles on this list, showing us that fans are still rabid for great indie titles on the Switch. Fast RMX. Do you miss games like Wipeout, F-Zero, or even that Star Wars Episode 1 pod racing game? You'll feel right at home with Fast RMX. Golf Story. This one might be the most unique game of the bunch. While Golf Story looks like your standard RPG, it's actually quite a robust golf game. Explore different lands, use your golf skills to solve challenges, and play a whole lot of golf along the way. Enter the Gungeon. Originally released on other platforms back in 2016, Enter the Gungeon is a bullet hell dungeon crawler following a band of misfits seeking to shoot, loot, and dodge roll through the gungeon. This title being on the list shows that a title that may be a bit older on another platform can still do extremely well when ported to Nintendo Switch. Overcooked. Overcooked might be one of the freshest takes on local multiplayer party gameplay that we've seen in a while. You and your team of chefs must run a kitchen and push out orders, all while surrounded in chaos and calamity. It feels like it was made for the Switch. NBA Playgrounds. NBA Playgrounds brought arcade basketball to the Switch. While NBA Playgrounds currently has a Metacritic of 63%, that didn't stop it from making this list. The fact that it's on this list shows that maybe gamers might be looking at the Switch to scratch their itches for gaming's past hits. In this case, the ultimate arcade basketball game, NBA Jam. And finally, Shovel Knight Treasure Trove. Of course Shovel Knight makes the list. The game itself is a love letter to the legendary platformers of the 8-bit era, like the Mega Man series and DuckTales. While it's the highest priced game on the list, it's fair to note that the Treasure Trove edition collects 3 Shovel Knight adventures. So, these are the top 10 indie games by units sold on Switch. Let's take a closer look. First, let's look at the titles objectively. If we look at them by genre, there are 7 adventure titles, 4 being top-down and 3 platformers, 2 sports titles, and 1 party game. It's interesting to see that there are no shooter or strategy titles on the list. By rating, we can see that there are 6 E for Everyone titles and 4 E10 Plus titles. It's also important to note here that there are no titles that have a higher rating than E10 Plus. By price, there's quite a variety, but all are below $24.99. There's 1 game at $24.99, 5 games at $19.99, 3 games at $14.99, and 1 game at $4.99. Now, let's look at graphics. In terms of 2D versus 3D, we can see that the list is dominated by 2D titles. There are 7 2D titles, 6 with pixel-style graphics, and only 3 titles with 3D graphics. Now, let's look at them a bit more subjectively. In terms of art style, it's fair to say that a majority of these titles employ a cute look. SteamWorld Dig 2, Stardew Valley, Kamiko, Celeste, Golf Story, Enter the Gungeon, Overcooked, and Shovel Knight all have arguably cute characters, whether it be in-game, on their cover art, or both. Even NBA Playground's characters are stylized to look more approachable. Aside from being cute, the characters just simply look awesome. Nintendo titles have always had such a strong emphasis on unique and appealing characters throughout the years, whether it be Mario, Samus, Link, Kirby, Star Fox, basically anyone that could appear in Smash Bros. Because of this, Nintendo audiences may be attracted to playing titles that feature strong character design. Another way to look at these titles, that may be a bit subjective, is looking at them as remakes or games inspired by hits from Nintendo's past. As described above, the majority of these titles have similarities with titles found in the 8-bit and 16-bit eras. SteamWorld Dig 2 can be compared to Boulder Dash or Dig Dug. Stardew Valley reminds us of Harvest Moon. Kamiko shares elements with Legend of Zelda. Fast RMX looks heavily inspired by the F-Zero franchise. NBA Playgrounds kind of looks like a remake of NBA Jam. And as we mentioned above, Shovel Knight looks like a love letter to the great games of the 8-bit era like Mega Man and DuckTales. So, if we're looking at a common thread for the majority of the titles in each of the categories we looked at, an ideal indie game for the Switch might be a 2D adventure title, made with pixel graphics, that's rated E, and priced between $15 and $20. In addition, the game should have strong character design, with an emphasis on the protagonist, and may have elements or mechanics that are reminiscent of hits from the past. So now that we've looked closely, what can you do now? Well, there are 3 things you can do to get started on making your Switch game. Number 1, play those games. The best way to get a feel for these games is to play them. Write down what you like, what you didn't, what surprised you, and what kept you playing. A great game designer knows other titles in and out. We'll have links to each one of these games in the description. Number 2, design your game. We have our recommendations above, but don't let that limit you. If you're struggling with ideas, just use them as a jumping off point. And lastly, number 3, check out Unity or GameMaker. There are a ton of Unity games on Switch already, and GameMaker has announced that they'll be launching a Switch-compatible edition this summer. Pick one and get familiar with it. Your hit awaits. And if you haven't already, watch our video on developing for Nintendo Switch. Thanks for watching. We are Ask Gamedev, and we make videos on games, the game industry, and more. If you like our content, please subscribe. We'll be back next week with a new video, but in the meantime, let us know what your favorite Nintendo Switch game is. Post your favorites in the comments.